So how did making friends actually used to work? Not through effort, through repetition. The same people, in the same place, again and again, without even trying. Sociologists call this proximity plus repeated unplanned interaction. It sounds clinical. It's actually just childhood. The same kids on the same block, the same desks in the same classroom, the same dorm hallway every single day. You didn't choose these people carefully. You simply kept running into them until a bond quietly formed. Researchers found it typically takes somewhere between 50 and 200 hours of shared time to move from acquaintance to real friend. Nobody consciously logged those hours. Life simply handed them to you for free through school, church, work, and neighborhoods. Then, over the last few decades, something changed. Not friendship itself, the machinery that used to manufacture it. Remote work removed the office. Streaming removed the shared living room. Algorithms removed the need to leave the house at all. Each convenience made sense individually. Together, they quietly dismantled the exact conditions friendship used to rely on. So here's the real question. What happens when the accidental machinery of friendship disappears, and making friends has to become intentional for the first time in human history?
In 2021, the Survey Center on American Life published a study with a blunt name, the friendship recession. The number of Americans with 6 or more close friends dropped from 33% in 1990 to just 13% in 2021. Men were hit especially hard. The percentage of men with 0 close friends increased 5-fold in the same period. Researchers began describing this specifically among men as a male friendship crisis. Many men reported their last close friendships were formed decades earlier, in school, and never really replaced since. It's not that people stopped wanting friends. Surveys consistently show people still deeply want deeper connection. What's missing isn't desire. It's the unplanned repetition that used to build it automatically. Adult life, by design, removes almost every structure that once forced people into the same room repeatedly. There's no more assigned seating, no more recess, no more dorm hallway you can't avoid. So a new industry has quietly emerged to manufacture what used to happen for free: friendship apps.
Apps like Bumble BFF and Meetup now exist specifically because proximity alone no longer does the job. Some users describe the process as strikingly similar to dating: profiles, matching, first friend dates, rejection anxiety, and all. Making a friend for the first time in human history increasingly requires the same deliberate effort as finding a romantic partner. Meanwhile, researchers studying childhood have found something equally concerning. Unsupervised, unstructured playtime has dropped dramatically since the 1980s. That unstructured time was exactly where children used to practice the messy skills friendship actually requires: negotiation, conflict, forgiveness. Some educators now report needing to explicitly teach conflict resolution, a skill children used to absorb naturally through play. Social skills, it turns out, aren't just personality traits. They're closer to a muscle, and muscles that go unused start to atrophy. Psychologists have a term specifically for social skills declining from disuse: social de-skilling. None of this happened through a single dramatic event. It happened one convenient, well-intentioned choice at a time. So let's fast forward 10 years and see what trying to make a real friend actually looks like once this trend fully matures.
It's 2035. You've decided consciously that you want a real friend. Not a follower, not an AI companion, a person. You quickly realize you don't actually know how to start. There's no natural setting left where this used to just happen. You download a friendship matching app. It asks you 14 personality questions before showing you a single potential match. Your first match seems promising. You schedule an actual friend date for Thursday at 6 p.m., calendar invite and all. It feels strange to schedule spontaneity, but apparently this is simply how it works now. At the meetup, conversation feels oddly effortful. You realize you're both a little rusty, like a language neither of you has spoken in years. There are a few too many long pauses. Neither of you quite remembers the rhythm of unscripted small talk. It's not a bad conversation. It's just noticeably harder than it probably would have been 20 years ago. You exchange numbers. You both agree it went well. Neither of you initiates a second hangout for 3 weeks. It's not disinterest. It's simply that neither of you has the automatic habit of reaching out first anymore. Meanwhile, your AI companion messages you daily, without fail, asking how your day went. It's easier. It's instant. It never leaves an awkward pause hanging in the air. You catch yourself reaching for that easier option more often than the harder, messier human one. By month 2, you finally see your new friend again. The rust is a little less noticeable this time. You realize friendship, like any skill, actually does come back with repetition. It just no longer comes back automatically.
Some cities have started experimenting with friendship infrastructure, public spaces specifically redesigned to force repeated casual contact. Communal co-working spaces, shared community gardens, neighborhood porch nights organized by local governments. It's a strange kind of progress, governments and city planners now actively engineering the accidental encounters that used to happen entirely on their own. At work, some companies have quietly reintroduced mandatory in-office days, not for productivity, but explicitly to combat employee isolation. HR departments now sometimes include a specific metric, employee loneliness risk. It sounds almost absurd, a company measuring loneliness like a business KPI, but the data on isolation and turnover made it unavoidable. By month 6, you and your new friend have a genuine inside joke, something small, dumb, and completely yours. It didn't happen instantly. It happened the old way, through enough repeated, unremarkable hours together. You realize the skill was never actually gone. It had just gone quiet from lack of use. Some researchers now describe this specific effort as friendship literacy, a skill set that, like reading, has to be actively maintained or it fades. Younger generations, growing up entirely inside this new normal, are starting even further behind than you did. Some schools have begun adding structured social skills classes, something that would have sounded unnecessary just a generation earlier. It's an odd milestone in human history, formally teaching a skill that used to be entirely free, automatic, and unavoidable. By year 1, your friendship feels solid, genuinely real, built the slow way with real effort in a world that no longer hands it to you for free. It cost you something the previous generations never had to pay: conscious, deliberate effort. And somewhere in that effort, a bigger question quietly starts to surface.
So let's slow down, because there's a much darker layer underneath this quiet skill loss. Loneliness, as we've covered before, carries real, measurable health risks, comparable to smoking in some studies. But there's a specific danger in losing the skill itself, not just the connection. It becomes a self-reinforcing cycle. The lonelier you are, the rustier the skill gets. The rustier the skill gets, the harder new connection becomes. Psychologists call this a vicious cycle, and unlike simple loneliness, it doesn't resolve itself just by putting yourself out there. Now, think about who profits from this. An entire friendship economy has quietly emerged around the gap. Paid friendship apps, rent-a-friend services, subscription-based social clubs charging monthly fees for what neighborhoods once offered free. None of it is inherently predatory, but it reveals something uncomfortable. Basic human connection has quietly become a purchasable product. And the companies behind these apps have the exact same incentive as every other platform: keep you engaged, not necessarily connected. A friendship app that actually succeeds and gets you offline permanently loses a paying customer. Some critics argue these apps are quietly incentivized to keep users in a perpetual state of almost friends, never fully connected. Now, here's a darker question. What happens to a generation raised almost entirely without unstructured social practice? Some researchers warn about a specific risk: adults who never built basic conflict resolution skills becoming more prone to simply cutting people off instead of working through friction. It's easier, after all, to unfollow a disagreement than to sit through the discomfort of repairing it. But friendships, historically, were built exactly through that repair. Every resolved conflict deepened the bond, not weakened it.
A generation that avoids friction entirely may be quietly losing access to some of friendship's deepest, most bonding moments. There's also a mental health dimension specific to men. Researchers have linked the male friendship decline directly to rising rates of male suicide in several countries. Many men report having no one to call during a genuine crisis, not because people don't care, but because the habit of reaching out was never rebuilt. This isn't a small side effect. Public health officials increasingly treat it as a core piece of the broader loneliness crisis. Now think about children again. Kids who grow up without unstructured peer time may reach adulthood without ever fully practicing repair. Some developmental psychologists worry this could compound generationally, each cohort starting a little further behind the one before. If friendship really is a skill, and skills degrade without practice, an entire society could be quietly losing fluency in something it once did effortlessly. And here's the twist. AI companions, designed to be endlessly patient and agreeable, may be quietly making this worse. Why push through the discomfort of a real disagreement with a friend when an endlessly patient alternative is always one tap away? Some therapists now specifically warn clients about over-relying on AI companionship precisely because it never demands the skill building that real friction provides.
None of this means AI companionship is inherently harmful, but it does mean the easier option and the more valuable one aren't always the same thing. Some economists have even started modeling the long-term productivity cost of a socially disskilled population. Teams with weaker interpersonal trust, some studies suggest, collaborate measurably worse, innovate less, and burn out faster. What started as a personal, quiet loneliness may be scaling into something that reshapes entire economies and institutions. And it alludes to the single most uncomfortable question in this entire video.